What's up, everyone, and welcome to the first WagerWave podcast episode where we interview the most popular sports bettors in the game. Kicking things off strong, we've got Daniel G, better known as Honest Bets on TikTok. With over 80,000 followers, he's built the most loyal fan base we've ever seen in the industry by just keeping it real. No paid picks, no gimmicks, just sharp insights and full transparency. You've probably heard his catchphrase, less print, after one of his daily picks. He's also the co-founder of ISO Fantasy, a new DFS app shaking things up. Without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
Of course. So, starting things off, I guess, what does the name Honest Bets mean to you, and how did you choose that to reflect your approach to betting content?
Yeah, so when I actually came up with the name Honest Bets, there were a few other options that I was thinking of. I think one of them was like no bull betting. And I kind of, threw it around with some friends, and Honest Bets was, the one that I decided to stick with. In terms of what it means, it kind of just reflected what I wanted the channel to be. I wanted it to be, win or lose, an honest betting page. Now, obviously, I expected to win given like a track record. I wasn't some random bettor who decided to make a betting page. But that's kind of where the name comes from. And then, what I feel like at least I saw that I was the first to do was win or lose, I'm reacting to the pick from the day before. And I felt like that kind of added not only a level of transparency, so you can, kind of see it, but also accountability, right? If I'm giving you these picks, I shouldn't just be skipping over losses, right? It shouldn't be, hey, every video that you see of mine is we hit for this much, we hit for that much, day after day after day, and you as the viewer aren't feeling that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think kind of going off that too in terms of the transparency idea, do you feel like any pressure ever to post bets even when there's really like no clear edge just to kind of maintain engagement?
No, I don't. I probably should, but I definitely don't. In terms of engagement, I actually don't really look at my views, which is probably probably surprising for most creators. At my peak, I know like the relative ranges. I was probably averaging around like 80,000 views a video, and that is, it's fallen off significantly. That was kind of expected because you were always going to run into some kind of bad variance. I don't know. Betting is a patient process that not many people have the patience for. So I kind of expected the views to go down. I probably get around 5K now. But I honestly, I couldn't tell you how many views my last video got. And then in terms of not forcing bets, I mean, that kind of goes down to like the ethos for why I started the channel. I wanted to create a page where, people had access to bets that were considered sharp, that, I believe are sharp, have historically been sharp. And you can't do that by forcing bets. Fortunately, not every bet has a sharp side. In fact, most don't. For example, let's look at a coin flip. A coin flip is 50-50 on each side, right? If for a coin flip you were to get paid out as if it was 49-49 on each, 51-51 on each side, both sides of the coin flip in the long run would be a bad bet, right? So like the idea that you can be on the wrong, like you definitely can theoretically be on the wrong side of something, right? But the idea that every bet has a good side is just not true. Some things are just priced efficiently.
Really makes sense.
Yeah. When you're crafting these well thought out bets, are there any sports or markets you typically focus on when coming up with your play of the days?
Yeah, so for the play of the days, it's typically just the NBA. It's in terms of like specific NBA markets that I'm focusing on. While it is everything, it kind of tends to lean towards rebounds, assists, and some combo stats. I think, me and my friends, with the people that I bet with, we track and analyze our bets pretty heavily. I mean, we have a spreadsheet with like 40,000 bets that has all of our bets. And those are just the categories that have performed the best for us this year. So those are the ones that I try and give out to my audience. Yeah, I mean, for the channel, I pretty much only give out NBA plays on my personal bets. I bet all markets, although the NBA is primarily the market.
Awesome. And kind of going a little bit more specifically into those bets, how important to you are units in sports betting? And is it kind of better for the general audience listening to kind of keep the units consistent or vary them based on kind of your varying levels of confidence in the bet?
So as a blanket statement, I'm going to say that you should keep them consistent. units are really, really important. Variance sucks. It happens. If you're doing it long enough, there's literally no way to avoid it. With that said, when I started, I was not the most responsible, just because I didn't know any better. I think when I started with $100 that was deposit matched into $200. It was on Prize Picks at the time. And I think I did, $20 units doing like five leg parlays, and I got lucky in the sense that I hit some early, and then I just didn't increase my unit size, and then I started unit sizing more regularly. But in terms of, is it better to keep units consistent or vary them based on confidence levels? At the bottom, and when I say at the bottom, I mean like as in like people who are starting to bet. At the bottom, you can vary them, assuming you have a deep enough bankroll, right? Like let's say you're betting 1% per bet, right? So you have 100 units. If there's a play that has a particularly strong edge, I don't think it's crazy to put 2 to 3 units on it. Now, is it crazy to put 10? Absolutely. As you get towards the top, and when I say top, I just mean by experience, you kind of like your biggest issue is no longer about units. It's about how can I get the most money down? Like you run into liquidity issues with limits. So your unit kind of like fatigues and you just have a max bet, and you're max betting everything for the most part. Now, the Super Bowl might have a $50,000 limit. You're not betting that. Also, the Super Bowl is super efficient, so it's pretty tough to find a good bet. But that's a completely different tangent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, I mean, I know you've seen some of our videos. You know that WagerWave is really focused on just bringing transparency to the sports betting industry, something that you preach a lot on your channel too. And we were just curious what you think the biggest problem is facing the sports betting industry today in terms of following these like so-called sharps and betting influencers that are all over the internet.
Yeah, the biggest problem. Let me think about this one for a second. The biggest problem facing the sports betting industry in terms of following these so-called. I think that there's two problems, or two main problems. There's probably a few. The first one is I think that those who are not legit are kind of preying on people who are susceptible. They're showing, a really high lifestyle that, first off, is not attainable for most sharp sports bettors. You know what I'm saying? I know plenty of legit sharps. None of those dudes, including myself, can afford to go and buy a Lamborghini. You know what I'm saying? So like, the idea that like you're in Vegas with $1 million cash on the bed, you know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous, and I think it kind of targets those who are more susceptible to deception. The other thing that I think is a real challenge for following sharps is those who don't understand variance, and that you can kind of write off very legit people because you're not experiencing short-term results. And I think that's problematic for the people who are trying to tail, because you find someone who may be legit. Maybe you go 0-4 and you're like, okay, this guy sucks. And then you just kind of go to the next person who statistically is probably not legit because of how many people there are out there that aren't legit. Now, it's tough because if you were to run like, a deep statistical analysis on like who's sharp and who's not, you need a rather large sample size, like to the point where you'd go broke if you were to try and run that sample size on each creator. I mean, I guess you wouldn't have to bet on it, right? So if you weren't to bet on it, you were going to like paper trade it, then sure, that would work. But if you were to actually put your own money there, definitely don't recommend that. There's way too many creators. It would take way too many bets. You'd lose a lot of money. So I think that's an issue.
And just out of curiosity, as a follow-up to that answer, like there's so many sharps out there on TikTok that are charging crazy amounts for their bets. Some as low as like $10 a week, and we've seen some as high as $300 a week just to tail them. Are there any influencers or sharps that that are actually selling their bets for money and who are actually profitable? And you don't have to name drop. Just curious if there's anyone out there who is sharp who's selling their picks for money.
There's a few guys that I can think of. There are a few.
Very interesting. And kind of going off our past question as well, what advice would you give for someone who's trying to decide which influencer to trust or follow? I know you talked a lot about kind of deception in your past answer, but is there any kind of main advice you would give for like the general audience?
Yeah, find some kind of tracking. If they're not posting tracking, that's a red flag. The relationship that you have with a sharp is you're a customer. They are trying to get your business, not the opposite. It's not the other way around. Um, if you think about it from a business perspective, considering how many frauds that there are, if you if you could show proof, why wouldn't you, right? Like it would be financially advantageous to you to the point where, like, the idea that you could be a sharp sports bettor and sell picks to someone is a great value proposition, right? Like you are telling them that based off your track record that you expect to continue, they will make this percentage of their money, which typically beats the market just because it's a small dollar amount. It's a small dollar amount. You'll run into liquidity issues later, but in the beginning, it's fine, right? So you can have very high returns. It's a really strong value proposition, and it's fun, right? So like, it's very easy to get a customer given that you're legit, right? There's not much convincing to do other than that legitness. So why, as a creator, would that not be your focus?
That makes a lot of sense.
And on a little bit of a different note, we saw that you have an app out right now. It's called ISO Fantasy. We were just curious if you could tell us a little bit about ISO, what it does, how it works, etc.
Sure. So I started ISO with my other co-founders. We launched about 2 months ago. It's going well so far. ISO Fantasy is a peer-to-peer daily fantasy platform that takes a low fee. How it works is you get 5 picks, I get 5 picks, they're both the same picks. You pick the over, the under, and whoever gets more right wins. Our big thing is we only take 2.5%. For context, other platforms, I'm sorry, the lowest platform, which I can't name for legal reasons, but the lowest platform that you've probably heard of takes about 8.5%. So we take about a third of them. So, we want to create the best daily fantasy experience that gives people with ball knowledge a real chance to win. And the way that we do that is we have our low entry fee. Our peer-to-peer aspect makes it to where we can actually care about our users, right? Like, if you have these bigger companies that are versus the house, you could say that you care about your users as much as you want, but at the end of the day, it's an adverse relationship. It is not possible for all their users to make money and for them as the operator to make money. With us, it is because, since we take a fixed entry fee, off of a peer-to-peer matchup, it makes no difference to us whether you win or lose. We obviously want you to win on an individual level because we want you to be happy and we want you to succeed. But we have no incentive to make it harder for you to win, which is why we try and make it as easy as possible.
I think it's a great idea. And just kind of a follow-up question as well. What do you think has been kind of the most rewarding part of the process for you in terms of whether it was kind of developing that, up with the idea, kind of post-launch? What do you think's been kind of the most exciting part for you?
The most exciting part, I don't know, I think it's really cool to create something and kind of see it in action, and especially have users. That's really, really cool. Because, we had traction for it from a user perspective before you launch, but it's like, oh, like, what if no one plays it? Like, what if I did all this for nothing? There's a lot of like doubt that comes in. So it was really, really cool on launch day, which went really well for us to see people actually playing our app. That was a really good feeling.
Yeah, awesome. Well, definitely encourage everyone listening to go download ISO. And then thank you for answering all those questions. I think we're just going to be moving into a bit of a more kind of rapid fire, quick question part. Just quick answers, one sentence, two sentence, whatever you feel good with. So the first question is, what is your favorite sport to bet on?
Favorite sport to bet on? I'm going to go UFC. I'm going to go UFC. It's a lot of fun to bet on UFC.
I like it. And what is the most overrated stat to you in sports betting?
I think I've been getting killed on PRA. So I'm going to go PRA.
Interesting. And what is the worst bad beat you've ever had?
Worst bad beat I've ever had. See, I play so many bets. It's actually I don't them all. I remember. Hold on. Let me look up this dude's name. I know he's on the Hornets. Was it Josh Green? I remember there was a point where I had Josh Green. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was like under like 5.5 points, and he had 3 points, and they were down like 10 or like something like that, like a game that like wasn't comebackable, and there was maybe a second left. So there was literally no point at all. And I remember off the inbounds, he shot a corner three and made it. It made literally no difference to the game. What are we doing here? And it sucks because it's like Josh Green. You know what I'm saying? Like,
That's hilarious.
yeah.
Yeah, and then what's your favorite kind of bet? It can be straight, prop, parlay, whatever.
Ooh. Well, in terms of favorite, like as entertainment, it's definitely like, just like a typical money line. Those are a lot of fun. Uh, in terms of, what do I bet the most? It's definitely props. And the reason for that is they have less people betting on them. So it's a less efficient market. Main lines tend to be pretty sharp. And the sportsbooks actually know this. It's pretty cool. So their limits reflect that. So I'm making up numbers here, but let's say I could bet, $100 on a points over. The sports books might have that same game's money line at, I could bet $1,000. Again, made up numbers, but they increase their limits because that they know they have less risk on it because it's more efficiently priced. So that's really cool.
Totally. And then the final question is, do you hedge or let ride?
So unless it's life-changing money, you should always let ride. And the reason is the books kind of add like a vig or a fee in a sense. They don't give you fair odds for the cash out. Right now, let's say you're one of those dudes who is, on like Barstool Sports or something like that because you have a $400,000 parlay. Like that's life-changing money, right? At that point, you're like, F the fee that they're going to take. Let me just get my money if this can change my life. So I always let it ride. I would say for people watching, if it's not life-changing money, let it ride. And if it is life-changing money, then, that's your decision to make. It's your life, not mine.
Awesome.
Answers. Well, Daniel G, Honest Bets, thank you so much for hopping on the first episode of our podcast. Everyone listening, comment who you want us to interview next down below. Make sure to go check out his channel along with ISO Fantasy on the App Store.
I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thanks for
of
hopping on.
course. Thanks for hopping on.